Okay, I'd like to introduce our next Fireside Q&A here at the Planet MicroCap Showcase Vegas 2024. It's a Fireside Chat hosted by Mathieu from Rivemont MicroCap Fund with the team from BQE Water. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Bobby. So with me, I have David Tocqueville, President and CEO of BQE Water, and Peter Gleason, Chairman of the company. And full disclosure, the fund I manage is a shareholder of the company. So let's just start with both your backgrounds.
Hi, I'm Peter Gleason, Chairman of the company. I spent about just over 30 years the other side of the table doing due diligence for fund management groups. Also, they at times put me into companies that were struggling and turned them around. I ended up with an aptitude for the mining industry and actually built a mine from starting with 3 people in 2000 to we ended up employing 1,700 people and sold that to Trafigura in 2008, 2009. So carried on in that vein. All the investors in the fund, we're a group of people now that still invest together. One of the companies that we was invested in was this very company and its previous guys. We identified, or the shareholders identified very quickly that it was going in the wrong direction. David had actually left the company then. He was with the company initially. He'd left the company then. I was asked to step in and sort the company out for the shareholders. I said I'd do that only if I could bring the technical director back, which I did. And in 2018, David and I took over the company and started the change in the strategic direction and the revenue model of this company. So that's my background. I've gone from fund management to the running companies, but I've actually brought 3 companies now over time to full fruition and sales.
So I'm a chemical engineer by background, and I basically spent my entire career in mine water treatment. That's what I've done all my life. I joined the company when there were 4 of us. I was the manager of engineering, and really glorified title, but I was really in charge of everything from the design, procurement, building the first few plants, actually going to the field, hiring people to operate them, the plants, and then overseeing the operations. And I guess over the number of years, my role in the company changed, evolved, and as Peter said, at one point I left because I couldn't see the strategic direction of the company being the right direction, and then Peter brought me back in, and I've been the CEO of the company since 2014.
Awesome. So let's dive into the business. What is BQE all about?
I'll talk, but I'll let the technical guy do it, guys. I'm the business guy. He's the technical one. Just
okay. Yeah. So BQE Water is company specializing in mine water treatment. So we deal with water in the mining industry, all sorts of water, process water, groundwater, pit waters, tailings waters, and basically the company is we're a service provider, and the service we provide, we actually say our product is clean water, and the services we provide come in different shapes and forms, but ultimately we stay with projects and with clients, and we're responsible for water basically through the entire life cycle of mining projects, from permitting all the way to closure, and that's really what the business is.
Perfect. So can we dive a little more into the business model and the types of revenues that you're generating?
Yeah, certainly. So like I said, we basically are a service provider, and the service comes in different shapes and forms, but we basically build a company around the recurring revenue from water, from clean water that we produce. We're responsible for the clean water production. And really the model is, and what makes us different too, is that we have a very significant intellectual property in certain areas of mine water treatment that's super important to the mining companies today. And we'll probably touch up on what those areas are and why. But we find that basically the recurring revenue from operating treatment systems and discharging clean water is the best way of monetizing the value of the intellectual property. So we're not really licensing IP, we're not selling equipment, we're actually responsible for clean water production, and that stream of revenue, that's basically tolling fees for, per 1,000 gallons or per cubic meter of water that meets the specification, is the best way of monetizing our intellectual property.
I'll just add to that very quickly. Is one of the things when I was sitting your side of the fence, everybody, is, people are out there inventing solutions to problems that don't exist or markets that are not ready for it. Very important to us is where we built our suite of IP around where the regulators are going, and not only going, they're there. In certain jurisdictions now, they're already there, and all the other jurisdictions they're looking at. So the actual regulators are forcing the miners to come to people like us, and we do it in a very unique way.
Okay. Can you talk about the sales cycle? When do you get involved in a mining project, and how long do you get involved?
Yeah, certainly. So what's really unique about the mining industry in general is that these lives of projects are extremely long. Okay, so on average, it would take a mining company anywhere from 5 to 20 years between discovering a deposit, an ore body, and putting the project into production. And also understanding that there is, probably the ratio of mining projects that are going through development to those that actually turn into operating projects that need active water treatment. That's what we do. That ratio may be like 10 to 1. There's 9 mining projects that fail because they don't have financing, they have problems with metallurgy, there's just not enough metal in the ground, the commodity price goes down, various reasons why that may not happen. So the sales cycle in our business is, it's kind of a misleading thing because we provide technical services on the upfront, permitting, treatability studies, laboratory testing, engineering. And, for those contracts, the sales cycle is pretty short. Like, we get a laboratory treatability study within a few weeks. Feasibility study for engineering, we probably have a visibility 6 months or 1 year ahead of time. But these contracts those are the non-recurring revenue services, and they can be lumpy. They're very difficult to forecast exactly when they're going to happen. But the sales cycle to get them is fairly short. To get to the actual operating plant, like I said, between the discovery of the deposit and the operation, it can be very, very long. And depends on where we enter with the client. So I would say on average, we would probably see 5 years between us getting first involved with the client to turning on the keys on the new operation and new stream of recurring revenue. There are some that come in, much shorter, but some maybe actually even longer than that.
So you're effectively like planting seeds with the technical services upfront, with the goal of getting operations recurring revenue over time. Is that right?
Yeah. Basically, we what's really important is to enter the projects when the client is trying to formulate their plan on how they're going to deal with water. So every mining project, doesn't matter where it is, it could be in the Arizona desert, it could be in the Chilean desert. When you're digging into the ground, sooner or later you're going to intersect water, and then the water starts to pour into your mine workings to deal with it. You may also be in jurisdictions where it rains a lot, and as the mine footprint increases, you have to deal with the runoff that becomes contaminated. You also have tailings ponds full of water. And by the way, I encourage you to Google BHP and tailings dam failures. Today, BHP settled for $26.9 billion for failing a tailings dam.
That's their offer.
That's their offer.
That's their offer. That's the payment they actually want.
But to answer the question, we basically want to get in early when these plans around water management are being formulated, introduce really the holistic view of the life cycle cost of dealing with water, and then introduce the solutions that we can provide. And once we get embedded in the project, which includes permitting, that basically they cannot build a mine, they cannot proceed with unless they change the permit. They have to do it with our solution being basically part of the project.
I'd add a little something on the sales cycle, which we're just starting to see changing. And David's correct. And obviously we get paid all along the way. We're always getting paid. We don't do anything for nothing. But we're starting to see a sea change now in where people are coming to us like, if you go from literally the laboratory, which is our own laboratory, everything from the start, we do that in the start, and we bespoke looking at how dealing with their problems. But one of the things we're seeing is that sales cycle is slightly shortening, because when people didn't know how it would work, they would insist you built a pilot, and then, you know, once you've built the pilot, you had to man it 24/7 for an amount of months. Sometimes it could be many months, sometimes it could be just a few. And then you would go collect that data, put it down to the client, go and talk to the client and that. We're now at the stage where we've built enough plants that we can say to the miner, come and look at the one we've done in Arizona, come and look at the one we've done in Virginia, things like that. So I think it's fair to say there's some compression of that sales cycle there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you talk a little bit about, what's unique about your IP, and maybe touch also on the competitive landscape?
Yeah, certainly. So there are basically these four segments in our IP portfolio. And, I'd say probably the most exciting in terms of, they're all important. And by the way, when you look at our MD&A, I believe, or at least the corporate slide deck, you realize that the projects that we do, the portfolio of those projects is very well diversified with respect to those four areas. But the area that's really growing fastest is the selenium area. Selenium is really a new contaminant that emerged as a high priority contaminant for the regulators across the world, primarily in Canada and the US, sometime around the year 2012. The new regulations in the US came into effect in 2016. In British Columbia, they shortly followed, 2018. Now we have several provinces in Canada also with strict regulations. And we see that sector to be really, a catalyst for our future growth. So 5 years ago, that was probably less than 5% of our business. Now it's close to 30% of the business. The other one that's really exciting for future growth is the cyanide recycling portion. So that's for precious metals. Probably those of you who are not familiar with the mining sector don't realize that it's very hard now to find clean, what I would call clean gold deposits. Historically, you find gold, you use cyanide, you produce gold. These deposits these days are complex, and they have base metals like copper and zinc mixed with the gold. And when you apply cyanide, these other metals are consuming cyanide and increasing your production of gold, cost of production of gold. And so this technology, which is basically, actually, we have a significant IP as know-how in it. It's not patent know-how. One of our directors actually is the original inventor of the process. Is truly a technology that is enabling gold production in certain projects. So they literally would not have the gold mine without actually being able to apply cyanide recycling technology. So those two are really, we believe, are catalysts for our growth in the future. But the other ones, like sulphate and metals, are still very important in our portfolio.
And what's the alternative for the miners? You mentioned some of them have no other choice, but like on some projects, there's probably some form of competition. So who do you typically compete against?
So I actually want to go one slide back. So this thing here, this image that you see here, this double-headed fish, that's the poster child of selenium toxicity. At very small amounts of selenium, you have chronic deformations and mutations of fish that happens. So specifically talking about selenium, we are the only solution on the market today that's non-biological, and that's very, very significant. It means that we can, there are several unique advantages of the non-biological approach, but one of them is we can really meet the standards that are prescribed by the US and Canadian regulators for the receiving environment, which is like rivers, lakes. We can meet that standard directly at the end of pipe. Why is that important? It's important because one of the drivers actually we see for mining projects is social acceptability of their project. It's not necessarily we have to meet a discharge at the end of pipe. It's the social acceptability. If they can meet the limit that's set for the lake directly at the end of pipe, they can stand in front of the local communities and say, we're going to build this mine, and by the way, we're not going to rely on dilution. And the fact that they say we don't rely on dilution saves them years in permitting, gets them a buy-in from the local communities, and gets the social acceptance for the mining project. So that's a huge value for them, and the biological systems cannot reach those limits at the end of pipe. We also, being non-biological, we can turn the system on and off as needed. In many situations, the treatment that's required is intermittent or seasonal. So you can shut the plant down for 5 months if you don't have water, or in Canada, the water freezes, there's nothing flows. So you don't have to spend money on continue to run and heat the water in the wintertime. You can just shut down and come back in the next season and restart. And one other advantage of that is specifically in situations where, you know, such as our first installation in the ash pond market, where literally the utility wants to remediate this ash pond but operate 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. They don't want to work on the weekend, and they literally want to shut it down at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and walk away from it. They cannot do that with a biological system. And we're truly the only non-biological solution on the market, so a very strong position there.
I think what's important with that is, in all the technology that David's talking about, is about 2/3 of what we're looking at, projects we're looking at, we're sole sourced for many different reasons. In other words, we're not bidding against anybody. That puts us in a unique position that, as we've been building the company, we understand that we still have to be still in the range of the other, for want of a better description, competitors out there, because, you know, people will look at price, but people are starting to learn now that we give a very different service. And, you know, every year we're on a mine site operating, we improve the operation of the mine site every single year. But I'll let that go. But the important part is 2/3 of what we work on, there is nobody else who can bid.
You touched a little bit on some of the tailwinds for your business, namely regulation, social acceptability. Are there any other, maybe more macro drivers for your business that are pushing the adoption of your solutions?
Yeah, I think that it's, first of all, we're a small company positioned in a really growing market, and the market growth is driven by several things. You mentioned the regulations. So our business it's really for a highly regulated industry. I think that the mining industry is, you know, there was another presentation about oil and gas. Like, the mining industry is so much more regulated than oil and gas. We even looked at, you know, years ago about diversifying into oil and gas, and there's just no comparison. The regulatory drivers for mining are much stronger. And those regulations are actually driving the growth primarily because, you know, the number of new regulations. And first of all, the limits for contaminants are coming down. Second, they're identifying new contaminants like selenium that are becoming regulated that have never been regulated before. And then finally, what used to be acceptable in terms of water management strategies, such as, for example, storing water in the tailings dams. Probably some of you have heard about the tailings dam failure in BC, Mount Poly. You know, it wiped out completely kilometers of creek. That was caused by storing water in tailings ponds. That now is not possible. You know, that storage is no longer acceptable. So regulations drive it primarily, but then obviously we all believe that, you know, for electrification, there is going to be a lot more mining needed. And we also see that, you know, the needs for just any sort of, so for electrification, absolutely, but even for gold and silver, the miners are really an important part of the industrial sector.
Awesome. Let's open it up if anybody has a question. Go ahead. Okay, so the question is, do you use the same IP for all projects, or is it adapted project by project?
The IP is the same, but each site and each project needs to have the treatment set up differently. So we are customizing in every project, but the underlying IP is the same we're utilizing. It's actually a very important point where this very thing, the need to customize in the mining industry keeps a lot of the large water treatment companies out of the market, because they're just not able to customize every single time on a, you know, $20 to $30 million project.
I will add that as we work, we continue to learn as well. And it's in every contract we do with every miner, any improvement in the IP is ours, always.
Yep. Yes, the question is, you mentioned electrification. Is it because of rare earth mineral?
I think the need to electrify or decarbonize basically means you need to electrify. To electrify, you need copper primarily, right? And then you need batteries. And so you have copper, but you also have all the battery metals, manganese, zinc, nickel, cobalt. So it really, the tide in my, you know, mining industry goes through cycles, but the tide really lifts all the boats. Like literally all the minerals become more important. And I think another factor is the inflation part, where like the commodities, you know, adjustment for inflation, really, I mean, commodity follows, right? So.
I think we're out of time. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, guys.